Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trina Shanks. I'm Director of Community Engagement at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. We're going to have a wonderful conversation today about getting out the vote. First, I'd like to introduce the engaged team. We have Aisha Gaze, we have Fatima Salman, we have Sonia Harb, we have our intern, Blake Newman, and I don't think Jamie's on today, but we have Jamie Simmons, who's also our intern. And so next slide, please. So the purpose of our meeting today is just to explore why social workers should care about political efficacy, clarify voting logistics, debrief on voting access and voter suppression, and discuss how it might impact the communities clients we serve, and identify various efforts and opportunities to do getting out the vote on campus. And it's really nice that we're doing this today because last week, for those of you who were part of the webinar we did with Joycelyn Benson, Secretary of State, and our other guest, we've been talking about it at a high level, but now we can really hone in on what we can do at the School of Social Work and on campus at the University of Michigan. A few notes about accessibility. Captions should be at the bottom. If you don't see it, you can click on speaker view in the upper right-hand corner to make sure you see the speaker and not a lot of different faces at once, if that's what you want to do. And you can click on closed captioning at the bottom of your screen in order to see the closed captioning. So as I mentioned, this session is focused on voting rights, logistics, why social workers can care, and what you're doing and what we can do together to get out the vote on campus and beyond. We're getting really close to election day now, so these issues are really, really important. They've always been important, but the timing is such that we really need to pay attention to them now. So next slide. I get a chance to introduce you to our guest today. We have some wonderful speakers. So we have Erin Byrnes from the Ginsberg Center. She's lead of Democratic Engagement there. We have Sumaiya, who is the Michigan State Director of Campus Vote Project, and we love to hear what she has to say about what's going on throughout the state. We have our own clinical faculty, Justin Hodge, who is assistant professor at the School of Social Work, assistant clinical professor at the School of Social Work, and is also in charge of the Get Out the Vote work for the school. So now I'm going to turn it over to Aisha, who's going to help facilitate this session, and I'm looking forward to all the things we discussed together today. So all yours, Aisha.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you to these amazing guests, these guest speakers who are joining us. We're so excited to have you guys on. So, as Trina said, this session is meant to be interactive. So we're going to give you the opportunity to ask questions, unmute yourself, write in the chat, and we want it to be conversational. And we also want to know, what are you doing around voting? Are you out there in the community? Are you working with special populations? So we want to hear from you. So next, I really want to give the guests a chance to introduce themselves. So I'm going to give you each 5 minutes, and I want you to talk a little bit about, obviously, the work you do, but also why is voting important to you? Why does this matter to you? And why did you get involved? So take it away, either one of you. Sumaiya, if you want to start.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Fatima, Aisha, and the rest of the team for having me today. I'm really excited to talk about this. And as we're gearing up for elections, it's really important that we're all involved in this. Regardless, you don't have to be just in the political world or working in the political world to be involved in this. This is for everyone. So again, my name is Sumaiya Ahmed. I work with Campus Vote Project. We are a national organization based out of DC, but I work specifically to mobilize our 97 institutions here in Michigan to get out the vote. The one word I really use to really capture the work that I do and my team does here in Michigan is institutionalize. So while voting webinars and events and items like that are really important, it's really important that we institutionalize this work on campuses. So I work directly here, and Fatima, you can go to the next slide. I work directly here with our campus administrators to make sure that this work is really in the work that you're already doing on campus. So like working with the School of Social Work departments and other departments on campuses, making sure this is ingrained in your orientations, in your schedules, so you don't have to choose whether you need to study for an exam or you need to attend an exam or be able to get out the vote. So really making sure this is all encompassing and not just focused on the day of getting out the vote. I'm excited throughout this program to kind of talk about the different ways that we're engaging campuses, why it's important. But just from a personal lens, I'm a Muslim American woman here. I was born in the States and grew up in Michigan. And that could probably be the number one reason why I feel like it's important for me to have my community voices heard in other communities who are marginalized in this aspect in many ways. And so that's what although I come from a teaching background, I really felt it was important for me to transition my work and my lifestyle to make sure that all voices are heard, and the process to go about that is equitable and easy for everyone. So thanks for having me again, and I'm excited to be discussing this with you guys today.
Thanks, Sumaiya. Justin, do you want to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for making it. I know many of the students tuning in have a class in the morning and another one right after this. So thanks for spending your lunchtime with us. I'm Justin Hodge. I'm a clinical assistant professor here at the School of Social Work. I'm also running for Washtenaw County Commissioner. I'm the Democratic nominee because I won the primary. So I just got to win in November, and then I'll be County Commissioner in January. So obviously, if you had any class with me, you know that voting and democracy and policy are all very important to me. And really what I've wanted to dedicate my career to is getting more social workers to engage in policy and political work. And many of you know that through the classes that you've had with me. And really why I believe that is, I think for us to have better policy, we need better policy makers. And I think that social workers are the best equipped people to be in policymaking positions. There's not anybody from another field that gets the kind of training that we as social workers get around interpersonal practice, community organizing, management of human services, policy, of course, program evaluation, all the things that you have to learn about during your time in the program here. Those are all things that I would want my elected officials to have some skill in. And we're not well represented right now as social workers in elected offices or in appointed offices. It's important to have social workers at all levels of government. So I want to, continue doing the work that I'm doing here at the school. And then also after I win this election and take office in January, do work there to get more social workers to see that this is something that you all really can do and should be doing. And then around voting. Voting is, of the policy issues, the one that I'm the most passionate about, because all of our other rights do depend on our ability and people's ability to exercise their right to vote. And our democracy only will work as it's intended if everybody makes their voices heard, because we have a representative democracy. But we see that that's really not the case. People tend not to vote. Voter turnout tends to be very low. We're looking at, hopefully this election will have record high levels of voter turnout, but it's not like it's going to be a 100% or close to it. And because of that, we have, that's how we end up getting people in elected office that don't represent the people that they're supposed to be representing, because we're not getting people out that are making their voice heard. So doing all that we can and getting social workers to see the value and importance of voter registration and making that something that's happening all year round is really something that I'm committed to doing, and the school is very committed to doing it too. I mean, you can see if you go on our website, and we'll talk more about this later, but if you go on the School of Social Work website, we got a really nice Voting is Social Work banner that really demonstrates. When you click on it, you'll see all the resources that the school is making available and directing you to, but our school is really committed to getting social workers more in this space. So I'm looking forward to having a great discussion with the panelists and all of you that are tuning in today.
Thanks so much, Justin. So Erin, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with my fellow panelists today and with all of the students. Thank you for taking the time to be with us for this conversation today. We appreciate it. My name is Erin Byrnes. I lead out our Democratic engagement work and the Big Ten Voting Challenge at the Ginsberg Center for Community Service and Learning, which is a straight shot down East U from the School of Social Work. But of course, I'm coming to you today from my home office in Dearborn, where I live. And so I've been doing voting work through the Ginsberg Center on campus for about 4 years now. Ginsberg kind of waded into the Democratic engagement waters just before the 2016 presidential election. And since then, we've really focused on building a broad, diverse coalition of administrators, faculty, students, and staff across campus to really institutionalize voting work, voter registration, turnout, education around the issues, and having events like this today where we're speaking specifically to, students, in this case in the School of Social Work, and talking about why and how what you're studying and what you plan to do with your career and your lives in the future how that ties into politics, to the issues, and to voting. And I think that's incredibly important, especially right now. Your ballot really it's essentially a piece of paper, but it's an important piece of paper where you can enact and express what matters most to you. And you have a way to really share those opinions and make your voice heard. So I think that's incredibly important. And the only other thing that I'll mention briefly, the Big Ten Voting Challenge launched back in 2017, and it's a nonpartisan, friendly competition for the most part across the Big Ten Conference. And I will tell everyone, as a bright spot in terms of young people and voter turnout, in 2014, so the previous midterm election, about 6 years ago now, we had a voting rate of 14% on the Ann Arbor campus. In 2018, the most recent midterm, that more than tripled. We went from 14 to 47%. So it's a huge jump. And I know that Professor Hodge had mentioned an uptick in voter turnout. And I want to let you know that we are seeing that. The data backs it up. And we're very excited to see what we're hoping will be a minimum 75% voting rate on the Ann Arbor campus this year. That is our goal for the Big Ten Voting Challenge. So I'm excited to talk to everybody today about how we can make that happen and how multiple stakeholders across campus, including yourselves, are part of that and can continue to be part of that positive momentum. So again, just excited for the conversation.
Thank you so much to each of you. I mean, you guys do such amazing work. I want to ask some just kind of general questions. And again, audience members, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we can unmute you and you can go ahead and ask a question yourself. One thing I want to ask all three of you is, can you talk a little bit about why is youth or students as a voting bloc important? Are they significant? Do they really make a difference in elections?
So I can go ahead and chime in here. So my work is primarily with students on campuses, like I stated earlier. And it is without question and without doubt that yes, youth vote and the young adult vote matters and the student vote matters. About 46 million young people ages 18 to 29 are eligible to vote, while 39 million seniors are eligible to vote, right? So you can already see with those stats and those numbers that our students make up a big block of voting, and young people make up a big block of voting. And through best practices and through this work, and I'm sure Justin and Erin can talk a little about this as well, after doing many of these things, you can see that young people in election related learning activities and discussions, they're encouraged to get out the vote, right? They want to do more of this work when they feel like Justin was talking about earlier, where when you feel like you see people like yourself in office, or you see people who represent you, your age block, your community, you're more inclined to getting out the vote. So these are some of the things that kind of go back to all of that and kind of go back to why the young adult vote matters and why it's important to kind of be on that stage, and that this election is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime, and it's so crucial for us to be in that. So that's just a little to that.
That's great, Sumaiya. You raised some excellent points about just why students as a voting bloc are important. And I think as well, students have so many connections, especially social work students, right? We're working in the community, we have our families, we have the power to really mobilize various networks when we get out the vote. Is there anything else that any of you guys would like to add to that? Just why is a student vote important?
Sure, I can add a note to what Sumaiya shared, which I think is spot on. I'll mention, in the 2016 presidential election, the state of Michigan was won or lost, depending on how you look at it, by about 10,700 votes. That's about a quarter of our campus population alone. And so when we talk about young people, college students, U of M Ann Arbor students specifically, having an impact on an election that impacts our country and by extension the world, that impact is there. Those numbers are there. And we see that. So I think we have a really direct impact on the way that things go at the local, state, and federal level. So I think that's really important, and that number is something to keep in mind. When we see more people turning out, I'll also mention in 2018 in the midterm, we had the highest voter turnout in the state of Michigan in over 50 years. So certainly in more than my lifetime. And what we saw there, in addition to just great numbers. We saw Proposal 3 pass overwhelmingly, about 70% support. And that was a nonpartisan proposal that expanded voting rights tremendously in the state of Michigan. So again, when we see more young people, more people in general voting, what we tend to see is policy passed and enacted, and folks elected also, as Sumaiya mentioned earlier, who look more like us, more like the broad population and not a specific subset. So I think that's important. And I think just in general for young people to vote, I mean, we are the people that are inheriting our planet and are inheriting some of the challenges and some of the great things as well that we have in place. But we are the people who are inheriting that. And so it's important for us to have our voices heard and to run for office and win, and to elect others who are running, who speak to the issues that matter to us, that speak to our experiences, and that are reflective of our identities. I think that's so important.
Thanks so much, Erin. I think that talking about just how our vote is our voice, right? And we have the right to have elected officials who are representative of our views and our experiences. So Fatima, I know you have a question about youth. Do you want to jump in?
Well, Aisha, can I add on to that point? Because I know a lot of our conversation will focus on the presidential election because it's huge. It's a huge election. I want people to also think about the importance of the local and state races as well. And we look specifically at Ann Arbor. We have so many students that are on campus or living near campus. It really should matter to all of you who your city council people are. I just finished a class where I was talking to a student who's focusing on a policy issue around affordable housing in Ann Arbor. I mean, that's something that affects all of us and it affects the region. And it's something that affects a lot of students that can't afford to live on campus because of challenges with affordable housing. And I mean, that's something that who you're electing at these local levels of government can make a real difference. So many of these issues that are important to us, I don't think people always draw that connection between, well, this issue is really important to me. This is the relevant policymaker that's responsible for that. And if you can draw that connection between the issue and the person that you need to vote for that, it'll get you more engaged.
Yeah, that's excellent points, Justin. I think that often students think that voting doesn't affect me. These policies don't affect me, but it absolutely does. If you're a member of any community, it affects you. Thanks for adding that. So Fatima, do you want to jump in with your question?
I do. I have a quick question. So back in 2016, I was the executive director of a national youth organization, a college organization. And I remember very clearly back then, college age individuals were very dismayed that their person wasn't on the ticket, right? And for that reason, I found out that many people that I knew in college weren't voting because of their dismay. So I'm wondering, from any of you working on college campuses, what is it that you're doing to make sure that these young folk are actually getting out to the poll, other than just saying that voting is important? I know that right now there is still some dismay as to who's on the ballots. So what is it what are more effective ways as a, comparatively to 2016 that any of you might be employing?
I guess I can add in here. So you guys might have heard of him, Dr. Marshall Gans, when he talks about how to do this work and how to really get people involved, he really talks about the sense of hitting your heart, right? So like Justin said earlier, it's not all about the big picture. Yes, voting for the presidential cycle and who's going to lead our nation is super important, but we really need to get back to the main issues, right? Like I said earlier, my community is a community that is impacted directly, through the Muslim ban and the things that came out with that. So you have to find what it is that the voters that you're talking to, what it is that is important to them. So when I come up to a student on campus, or when I'm having a conversation, my conversation doesn't start with, hey, are you voting? It's not necessarily just starting at that. It's starting about what issues impact your community and what's important to you, and how can we organize around that, right? And then you use that as a pipeline of getting down to the core root of, hey, well, whether it's the roads that impact you, right? Whether, you're driving down a road and that, you're hitting potholes, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, why don't we look at the proposals that are on your ballot? Why don't we, go to a city council meeting? Why don't we start from something local and start there, because it directly impacts you and it's something that you can see and be a part of right away. And so when I think it's just really, really important for us to understand that not everyone is going to be inclined to wanting to get out the vote just because, just because you think it's important doesn't mean that everyone else around you thinks it's important. You really have to find, what's in their heart and what can emotionally attach them to getting out the vote.
That's such great points. I love that you brought up Marshall Gantz because, like, I'm a huge fan, and I really believe what he talks about, and that it takes getting people to share their story, and I think that's very true with youth. Getting you guys to really share your stories and your experience, and then connect those experiences to policy issues. So if you can't afford housing in Ann Arbor, what policy does that hit on? If you feel like food access is an issue, what policy, what representative speaks to that? So the power of storytelling, I think, is amazing and can be a huge drive. So we have some questions in the chat, and I want to give those students a chance to ask them. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to unmute Max Freeland and go ahead and ask your question. We're just actually unmuting you. So just one quick second. Sorry, guys, there seems to be some sort of tech glitch. So I can just go ahead and ask it for you, Max. Max said, where is our vote most effective? I understand that it's important for students to vote, but if students on the Ann Arbor campus vote in the same precinct, does it minimize the effectiveness of our vote?
Well, so I think that comes down to, looking at everything that's on your ballot and thinking about what's most important to you and how some of the things work out. So let's talk about the Electoral College. I mean, people have a lot of really strong feelings about that. So let's say you came to this state from another state, and that state's one where your preferred presidential candidate is very, very likely to win, and that's the only thing you really care about. Well, Michigan right now, since we've become a swing state, your vote for president would have a pretty large impact here. But if we think about where in Michigan, let's say you came from Michigan from another city, and you're still really engaged with whatever is going on there in terms of policy at the city level or the county level, or you still have family there or friends, then you've got to pick where you would want to be registered at. You could update your registration to be here, and then if you're going to be really deeply engaged in the issues here, that would make sense for you to vote in the Ann Arbor area. Or if you're going to maintain your registration because you're still deeply engaged in the politics or policy, or you care about what the policy is, policies that are being made out where you're from, then you could keep it there. It's not, by precinct, you don't need to worry about how things are breaking out by precinct. It's more so like if you're voting for city council, you're looking at the ward for the city council. And then if you're thinking about county commission, which I think a lot about, it depends on what county commission your district that you're in. So it really just depends on which area are you more concerned about and engaged in the issues on, more locally. But then if you're thinking about the presidential election, you want to think about how things work with the Electoral College.
That's great.
And I would add to that, I would recommend that folks, and I'll put this in the chat, visit vote411.org, which is a League of Women Voters nonpartisan website, to build off of what Professor Hodge was saying. I think it's spot on. It really is getting a sense of which positions and which folks are on your ballot, and doing your homework to get a sense of where you feel your voice and your vote will have the most impact and the type of impact that you want to see. And I think you do tend to see that at the state level, certainly, when you look at, what is considered a red state or a blue state. I always refer to Michigan as a purple state, because we really are, and it varies greatly depending on where you're casting your vote in Michigan. So again, look at what's on your ballot. Vote 411 is a great place to get a sample ballot. Thank you for putting that in the chat. I appreciate it. And again, and, if you're voting absentee, which I would encourage folks to do this year, especially in the COVID-19 context, with regard to just public health precautions and social distancing, that allows you time to sit on your couch if you want to, be on the Vote 411 website, take a look at the candidates, the millage proposals. I'm seeing some of that in the chat. Those can be really confusing, and you'll want to take some time to comb through them. You might want to talk to a trusted peer, a mentor, and have those conversations with folks. So just give yourself time to do that, and I think you'll be in good standing.
Sumaiya, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you both hit it right on, but I guess I can add the resource, Fatima, if you want to go over to slide 9. Vote411.org is a really important website, as it includes, nonpartisan guides, and also you can kind of pick your guide depending on what, way you sway. But a really big resource, and I guess this gets a little bit into the conversation also about the work that we do on campuses, is, over the summer when COVID-19 was happening, a lot of our administrators were, of course, busy planning, what their world is going to look like once you get on campus, whether it's in person or hybrid and so on. So our team was really working hard, and we worked closely with Erin's team with students about what it is that you guys need and what administrators need on campus to kind of take this next step of doing this work. And who better to ask than students who are on the ground and, facing kind of these things on a day-to-day basis. And so we came up with the Michigan Students Vote campaign. And like I said, we partnered up with the Ginsberg Center for the Big Ten Voting Challenge, as well as the Secretary of State's office. And we came up with 3 things, which was 1, the Michigan Student Voter Engagement Toolkit, which is a virtual downloadable toolkit that hosts graphics, sample emails, social media verbiage, and more. It includes a lot of the links that Erin referred to, like Vote 411, which has like nonpartisan guides and things that you can look at to really take a look at the proposals and understand. And now we have the courtesy of, the flexibility of sitting on our couch and filling out our ballots and being able to do that. So, it's a 10 to 12 page toolkit that's constantly being updated with information that you guys can just copy and paste and use as you wish. Also, if you guys haven't visited this website already, please do. It's an offshoot to why am I blanking out on it? Michigan.gov/vote. What we decided was, let's make a student-specific website so that when students, stumble upon this page, they really have the questions and the answers that they need directly to get out the vote. So it's www.michigan.gov/student-voting. It has a link to, all the things that you need from the Secretary of State's website page, as they have developed the web page. But it's just more student specific, has a frequently asked questions, it has a link to the toolkit and more. And then lastly, we created the Michigan Campus Engagement Calendar that hosts national and statewide efforts that are going on, such as like National Voter Registration Day, or even down to an event like this that may be open to the public. So definitely take advantage of these toolkits and these resources. We wanted to provide them to make your life easier, to be able to just, take the content and use it as you wish. So I guess I'll just throw that in there.
That's great. Thank you, Sumaiya, for those resources. So Maria Rose, you have some questions, some really great questions in the chat. So we're going to go ahead and unmute you so that you can ask them.
Great, thank you. So I know one of them is more of a personal question, but I feel like the second one I've been really kind of questioning. So not only for myself, but I know I've had some other individuals in like my circle questioning it as well. During the 2016 election, President Trump won by Electoral College, but did not win the popular vote. Sometimes it can be kind of defeating to like thinking about does our vote really count in a sense like that. So I was just kind of curious what the facilitator's thoughts were about individual votes versus the Electoral College.
Yeah, I mean, I say your vote always counts. But again, my perspective on it is more than just the presidential election. I know people that have run for office and lost by a single vote or have won by 2 votes. And I mean, those are more local and state candidates. So, I mean, those people would definitely say every vote counts. Now, when it comes to the presidential election, yeah, I mean, because of the Electoral College, if there's a state that's going to go a particular way for president, it's important for everybody to vote. I mean, you don't know if everybody else is going to go vote. So you should still go to make your voice heard. But again, it's not like you're only going to vote for whoever the president is. I mean, there are lots of other things on the ballot, which is why you need to go to vote411.org so you can see what's on there. But what you're talking about is a serious issue with the Electoral College and why many people think it should be gotten rid of. I mean, I agree. I think we should get rid of it. But I mean, I can't do that as county commissioner. So that's a conversation that you should be a part of. I mean, to join some advocacy organizations that if you feel like that it should be gotten rid of, you could join in that fight. But certainly vote. and encourage everyone else to vote, because there's more than just the president on the ballot. And I know that we spend so much time focusing on national politics, which is really important, but a lot of the things that affect your day-to-day life are happening at the local and state level. And if you sit out an election because like there was a question earlier around why you're not deeply, you're not in love with either people at the top of the ticket or whatever else, you're missing out on voting for all these other people that are going to make a change in your community on a day-by-day basis.
I'll just add to that saying, Justin is spot on with voting starts locally, and as local as your campus community, right? If you, as students, whether you're talking about housing or transportation on campus or, things of that sort, having your voice heard means, maybe there's a ballot that U of M is proposing for, having something done on campus too. So voting can be looked at in very different lenses, and we can't always think of it from just a national perspective. That's kind of where you can get lost in translation. So you have to think about when you're going, you guys know, if the ballot is two-sided. There's multiple things that you're looking at, all the way down to county commissioner, which is, at a higher post, but like state representative, your local school board. So there's so many things that can impact us. So definitely, keep that in mind. And hopefully that's something that can encourage you to get out the vote.
I would second that. And I think it's challenging. I think this is a very real question. Your vote and your voice do count. Of course, it matters. When we look at the Electoral College, it's not only about the number of people who get out to vote, it's where those people vote, because that's the process, right? That's how the winner is dictated. And that's a real challenge. And I would agree with Professor Hodge. I am not a supporter of the Electoral College. I think it can lead to a sense of diminished capacity isn't quite the right word, but just a feeling of, I went and voted, maybe this person got more votes. Why aren't they in the Oval Office? And that's a real question, and it's fair. And I think personally and professionally, that's a change we need to see in our country. The Electoral College is enshrined in the Constitution, so it would require a constitutional amendment, which is quite a heavy lift. But again, we all get out and vote for folks who are talking about that issue. If it's something that's important to you, supporting those people is really important. I think it's a change that we can see. I don't know that it will happen immediately. I hope to see it in my lifetime, and I think that is something to look forward to. But I would also say, as important as voting is, one thing that I try to impress upon anyone, but our students especially, is that voting is one way to be engaged in our democratic process, right? There are so many other things that we can look at. I think Sumaiya mentioned earlier, attending a city council meeting or a county commissioner meeting, running for office, getting elected, working on campaigns, really pushing some of these local and state issues that are really important. I think those are great ways to be involved. Voting is key, but it's one step in a process, and hopefully what is a lifelong journey of civic engagement across a spectrum of available activities and opportunities. And if you don't see activities or opportunities that speak to you, connect with people, do that grassroots community building that I'm sure you all are already doing, and look to create those opportunities. Maybe it's pushing for a new commission at the local or county level that you can spearhead and be part of. Push your local and state elected officials to do the work that you think they should be doing, and get out and vote at all levels on the ballot. I think that's important as well.
I agree with everything that Erin just said. And really, it comes down to this: voting should be the floor for civic engagement, not the ceiling. And the Ginsberg Center has tons of excellent resources around how you can be civically engaged all year round and through a variety of different methods. But we can't just look at voting as you go vote, that's it, I've done my civic duty. That should be the bare minimum that if you're eligible to vote, that you're doing. I mean, there's so many other ways that people, all of us, especially social workers, need to be engaged.
That's great. Thank you so much for that question, Maria. And I know you have another one, but I want to kind of drive this, especially what you all said about the importance of local elections. I want to drive this home for why this should specifically matter for social workers. The NASW Code of Ethics really charges us to help to inform social policy. And I think that's because we can never really understand the full context of a micro or a macro issue unless we understand like the policy arena in which a person exists or community exists. So I just want to remind us that as social workers, being politically participant, understanding local policy has a huge impact on our clients, whether they're communities or they're single individuals. So it's something that I think that our profession charges us to be responsible, to be engaged in. So Maria, do you want to go into your other question I saw that you put in the chat?
Yeah, so this is just a very brief one, but I noticed that it's taking some time to switch my registration. I'm actually a resident of Oregon, but I thought that it would be easier to switch my registration to Michigan. But I keep going to one of the online websites and checking if I'm registered, and it's saying that I'm not. And so I'm just curious how long that process usually takes, and if there's a way to kind of expedite that process to move it forward, because I'm just afraid that we're going to get down to like a week or so, and then kind of worried about maybe missing that deadline.
Maria, I'm happy to touch base with you offline. I'll drop my email below. I can connect you with the Secretary of State's office. They have a direct line for students too, that can probably help expedite what you need done.
Thank you so much.
And I would add to that, we do have, I have to give a plug, we do have a satellite city clerk's office at UMA, our U of M Museum of Art. It's open right now, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And it will be open expanded hours starting next weekend. So you'll have some weekend hours there as well. But if you're experiencing delays, if you want to check on your registration, all of that can be done at the satellite office in UMA. You can go, you can get registered, you can even complete and submit your absentee ballot there. So you're done. I know you mentioned some anxiety maybe around, the election is fast approaching. I don't want to be a week out and not know what's going on. I would really recommend if you're on campus, of course, wearing a mask, practicing social distancing, but visiting UMA if you feel safe enough in person. Off hours, I would say like early weekdays tend to be a little bit quieter if you're looking at that. But again, that's a place where you can go, get registered, one-stop shop, and then hopefully that alleviates some of that waiting and anxiety.
Would you mind dropping that location in the chat for me? I don't know where I'm at anywhere in Ann Arbor, so.
Absolutely, not a problem, we'll do.
Thank you.
All right, great. So I know we have some other questions, but before we move on to some other questions from participants, I wanted to know, Erin, could you clarify, and Sumaiya, what is the Big Ten Voting Challenge? And if you could also talk a little bit about the School of Social Work's involvement in that, I think that would be great.
Absolutely, happy to. So I'll give a little bit more background, and then we can talk about the School of Social Work and what that has looked like and does look like now. So the Big Ten Voting Challenge launched on Constitution Day in September of 2017, so roughly a year after the 2016 presidential. And it was, I do want to give credit where credit is due, it was modeled after the SoCon Votes Challenge. So that's the Southern Conference. And so we got talking with Professor Edie Goldenberg out of the Ford School. She was familiar with the SoCon Challenge and said, where is Big Ten in all of this? And fortunately for us, Professor Goldenberg is on a first name basis with President Schlissel. So she went right to him and said, what do you think about this? Will you sign on? And fortunately, he said yes. And then he challenged the other 13 Big Ten presidents, and they all signed on as well. And so from there, we've developed a team of staff, faculty, students, administrators at all of our 14 Big Ten campuses. We actually have a call later today. We do monthly planning calls. And the goal of the challenge is to get, ideally, all of our eligible students registered, educated on the issues, and out to vote. And so our first benchmark for the challenge was the 2018 midterm election. We had one winner for the campus with the greatest overall turnout of eligible students, which was University of Minnesota. And then Rutgers edged us out by a hair for the greatest growth in turnout from, in this case, 2014 to 18. So we've re-upped for 2020. We're very excited about it. And again, our goal is to get all of our eligible students registered and out to vote. So that's the goal, and that's what we're working towards. And we hope to see it continue for many years into the future. And then School of Social Work has been a great partner. Back in 2018, we did what we called the 90% challenge. And so that was with all of our 19 schools and colleges with a motivational kind of tool or goal of getting at least 90% of eligible students registered. And so social work was a big part of that. And I think Professor Hodge mentioned earlier, the voting is social work, and it's just been, I think, a really great partnership. And I think social work has been really one of our key allies in that work.
I'll just add to that to say that, Campus Vote Project, we work really closely with Erin, Edie, and the team. And if you want to be directly involved in this work, a way that you can do it is we, through Campus Vote Project, hire democracy fellowships on the ground at University of Michigan. Currently, we have 5 folks that are on the ground, students that are doing this work. They work with Erin and Edie in different capacities, whether that's tabling or focusing on the Big Ten voting challenge, or working with the School of Social Work. So if you're interested, we have them on a rolling basis. They are paid fellowships, and you get to do some great work on campus. And I think Professor Hodge said it earlier, where civic engagement is not just getting out the vote; it's being a part of the process. So this is a direct way that you can be working as a student on campus to get out the vote, and working and encouraging others to do so too. So I will drop my email in the link or in the chat box if you would like to apply for the Democracy Fellowship.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know that also the School of Social Work has had really high performance and just getting out students to vote, which is awesome. And like you said, like you all have said, voting is social work. And we're really the eyes on the ground, right? Like we're in the community. We can really pick up on kind of the nuanced information that can help inform policymakers, or help to inform ourselves if we decide to enter the political arena. So we have a question from Seal, Nicole Waters, who, Fatima, if you could go ahead and unmute Seal, I would like to give you an opportunity to ask your question.
Hi guys, I'm Ciel. Thank you for letting me speak. But so I am a resident of Michigan from kind of the greater Grand Rapids area, and I have chosen to remain registered in my hometown because my vote counts more there than it does here. But this year I was considering voting absentee, but given everything that's going on about concerns over election security and how slow the Postal Service has been recently, I think it's more, personally, I feel like it's safer to go vote in person. So what would you say, or what are your thoughts on voting in person this year, given the threat of the virus, versus voting absentee with concerns over security? And what would you say to people who are concerned about voting either way?
So I would say you always got to prioritize your health. And in Michigan, I mean, Jocelyn Benson is a fantastic Secretary of State, and she's doing everything she can to make sure everybody is able to exercise their right to vote. So if you were to vote absentee, and I mean, you put it through the postal system, and it gets there, you can go on michigan.gov/vote and look up your information. You can track where your ballot is at through the process. So that's one option. Another option is if you are going to be in the Grand Rapids area, I don't know if you're there now and you're just videoing in from there, you could go to your clerk's office and vote now, like do early voting essentially there. So then it's just taken care of. You could get your absentee ballot and fill it out, and you could drop it off in a drop box in front of the clerk's office, most likely, or if they have additional drop boxes in the area. So you have other options besides just putting it in the mail and then waiting for it to get there. But if you do put it in the mail, there's still time between now and election day, so you could track to see where it's at in the process. And if for some reason it gets lost, you can get another one. So just my general recommendation is we need to be taking the pandemic very seriously. And it's fantastic that we have more voting rights in Michigan. We need to make use of those to ensure everybody's health and safety while protecting democracy.
I would second that. I would add, fairly recently, there was a ruling. Of course, it's being contested, so I would say take this for what you will. But a ruling that in Michigan, as long as your absentee ballot is postmarked on or by election day, it will be counted. So that's something as well. I would never encourage someone, though, to wait until the last minute. If distance is an issue and you will be putting it in the mail via USPS, that's an okay choice, certainly. My recommendation, though, would be to get that in the mailbox by Tuesday, October 20th at the latest. That'll give it 2 weeks to get there. And I think that's a reasonable amount of time, even with the delays that we're seeing. But again, I would say get that in the mail by the 20th. And and you should be all set. But again, I think that that concern is real. And as Professor Hodge mentioned, depending on location and whether or not distance is an issue, I think a lot of times we think of absentee voting, kind of like I said earlier, you're on your couch, you complete it, you put it in the mail, but you can put it in a drop box, again, depending on where you are. And absentee voting can also be essentially in-person early voting, as I referenced with the UMA satellite office, or you can go to your local clerk. So absentee voting isn't just, it doesn't just look one way. There are different ways to enact that, that method of voting. So I would say keep that in mind as well.
And I'll just add on, if you do not know where your clerk's office is, again, or need to look up an address, definitely refer to www.michigan.gov/student voting. You'll be able to look up ballot locations, clerk offices, all of that information. And secondly, we have same-day voter registration too. Although I do not encourage you all to wait until the same day, you have until the day of to cast your ballot and to make sure that you're registered to vote. So make sure you're included in that process and make sure your voice is heard.
Thanks so much for that question, Seal. So, we have been talking a lot about what students can do. I'm wondering, how else can students get involved on campus with GOTV efforts? Like, what else can we do in this space?
I can speak a little to that as we're working right now in this COVID-19 world. And this has been like a really hot question because, if this was pre-COVID, we would be tabling, we would doing events in person, rallies, all of that fun stuff. But now we're looking at a different way to do this. So the 7 key ways to act that we've been working and seeing this model work across campuses is 1, build a team. This work cannot be done alone. It's almost impossible for one person to engage an entire campus. So whether that team is, your work team, your colleagues, or your friends, build that team of how you're going to do this work, and register students to vote in a virtual capacity. So there are many cool events that are going on, and I can share this information with Aisha and Fatima that she can email you on. We have couch parties, which are essentially like webinars, but they're not, just lectures or panels. They're more of you chilling on a webinar on a couch, and you're texting your friends with preemptive texts that you can use to get out the vote, remind people to register. Social media, we have Instagram, Facebook, TikToks. There's many different ways that you can kind of get this word out on social media. So take advantage of that, share and tag, and also look for kind of those celebrity activists and celebrities that are Hollywood celebrities that are doing this work and tag them. I've been seeing a lot of them repost this and getting students engaged in this election cycle. Use this time to help students volunteer. So like I said, the Democracy Fellowship, or reach out to folks like Erin or Professor Hodge in ways that you can engage your social work friends. And then, build that excitement. Everyone kind of, what's the word that they like, FOMO, right? So whether you're posting or when you're on Facebook and when you're talking about it, build this election excitement and make sure that, you're sharing those stories that get people interested in wanting to get out the vote. And lastly, I would just say measure your impact, right? So document this work as you're going and monitor your progress, see what's working, what's not working, and share those best practices so we can always improve this work. And just remember that, I know we stressed it a lot, but it doesn't stop at after the presidential election. Essentially, it starts after the presidential election, right? So make sure that you are continuously working towards making our world a better place, and do that by having your voice heard. So I know we're stressing that a lot, but it's so very important.
Sumaiya, I love everything you just shared. I echo that 100%. I would also add, building off of that, there's a strategy that we call vote tripling. And so I think Sumaiya kind of touched on this with tagging people on social media. And, we've talked a lot about your voice and your vote. It matters and it counts. But you can triple or more the power of your vote by doing something as simple as, texting, maybe actually picking up the phone and calling. If people do that anymore, I don't know. But by texting, 3 friends, maybe it's 3 people in your class, family members, people in your home community, reach out to your network, because your sphere of influence is powerful, and it's probably a lot bigger than you think. When you really get to think about all the people you know, all the people you could send a quick message to. I actually did this recently. My best friend and her mother left for a trip to Lebanon just yesterday to be with family for the next month. And I said, oh, I'm excited for you, be safe, be cautious, which of course they are in terms of public health. But I said, have you voted yet? And she said, oh, no, I hadn't. I was planning to go in person on election day. And so I was like, I'm going to text you every day between now and when you leave to remind you to take your mom with you and go vote absentee at the clerk's office. And so I messaged her yesterday before she got on the plane. She said she had voted and it went well. But that's something where, that could have been 2 really important votes that would have been lost. And that's just an easy, quick thing to do. So I would encourage folks, again, think about your sphere of influence, think about how to triple or more the power of your vote. And I think that's a great way to do that. It's easy to.
I think that's fantastic, Erin, and it's really exciting for me to see all these different groups that are focusing on using campaign strategies to get more people to just vote more broadly. So like vote tripling is something that campaigns frequently do. Like we use that as part of the strategy to win the primary. But now there are all these nonpartisan groups and other groups that are just doing it to get people to just vote, period. I remember getting a text message yesterday just from a group, you get those political text messages. I got one of them that was just trying to get me in one of those vote tripling kinds of things, where the first one is like, are you going to vote? I just wrote back, yes. I'm like, okay, send me the nicknames of 3 of your friends that you're going to get to vote too. Like, I know what you're doing. This is good. So it does give me a lot of hope that voter turnout is going to be really, really high. And I have a lot of hope that the election will go a particular way if voter turnout is very, very high.
I think you guys also are touching on another great issue that I want you guys to talk about a little bit is, we know that voter suppression exists and we know that it disproportionately affects certain marginalized populations more so than others. So for example, individuals who are limited English proficient. Do you guys know anything about some of the things that are out there to help them, or individuals who were recently incarcerated? Do you guys have anything that you do around work with special populations in voting?
Sure, I can speak to that. I'll start by saying, and this is a little bit broader than your question, and then I'll circle back. So we do work at the Ginsberg Center with the International Center on campus. So we actually just last week hosted a lunch and learn, and so we try our best, although I think we can do better, to be perfectly honest. But we do work with our international student population around, first and foremost, what is legal in terms of involvement in the democratic process here, and what may put paperwork or a visa at risk, especially right now. That's very important. So we want to make sure that they have that baseline of just knowledge in that context. And then we also talk with our international students a lot about what their sphere of influence again looks like. We encourage folks to attend events, to be knowledgeable about the candidates, the issues, the ballot proposals, and talk with their friends. And essentially, even if you're not eligible to vote, asking friends who are to be your voice at the ballot box and to really think through how some of these issues, especially at the federal level, impact our international student population. So I think that's important. And we also do our best to push out the message that, if you are going to vote and English is not your first language, you can take someone with you to interpret and support you when you go to vote. Of course, if you're voting, absentee from home, you can do that in your own personal space. If you're voting on election day, though, you do have that right, and we encourage people to avail themselves of that right. And I think that's particularly important.
I'd add to that one way that all of you can be really helpful in helping make sure people vote is to be aware of what the laws are and spread accurate information. It's not uncommon that groups will spread inaccurate information to suppress the vote. I mean, there have been plenty of times in Michigan where a political party and other groups have spread the false narrative that if you've been convicted of a felony in Michigan, you can't vote. That's incorrect. And that's an attempt at voter suppression. There's also been another attempt recent. I think Jocelyn Benson mentioned this during last week, where there were these robocalls that were going out to people, basically discouraging them from voting, saying that if you vote absentee or you do a mail-in vote, we're going to get you, we're going to find your credit card information or something like that. So it's being aware of what's what the laws are and spreading accurate information and making sure that people can exercise their rights. And then for people that want to learn more about this, and this is a bit about what some of the things that we're doing as a school, and some of the things that I'm doing around here related to the upcoming election, is that you've seen all the stuff about the democracy and debate theme semester. One thing they put together was a toolkit about voting rights. And the one that we recently put up there is about who should have the right to vote. So it's a toolkit that gives you some critical questions around voter suppression and then the voting rights or potential rights of different groups. So for example, we have a segment in the toolkit about felony disenfranchisement, what that looks like across the country. And then there's a section in there around, in some states, people that have disability have their right to vote taken away. So you get some information on that, and then some questions to have discussions with people. And then two positive things are, if you're a fan of letting people vote, there are some states that allow 16 to 17-year-olds to vote or in state and local elections. And then there are some states that are allowing non-citizens to vote in state and local elections. So you get some information on that. I'm going to throw the link in the chat. It's a Canvas page that's open to everybody. There are a lot of other really good democracy toolkits in there too.
And to add to fact checking, I'll just say in the toolkit that we put in early, and I'll drop the link below again, there's a graphics section, and we, working with Erin's team, actually developed a lot of great graphics around fact checking. So you can't spread the word and share that enough. So there are resources for that. So feel free to take a look at that to share in text message with friends, put on social media. And it's all the basics. Sometimes you don't know, just because you know it doesn't mean everyone else knows it. So definitely take the time to spread or to make sure that you're fact checking and helping spread the word about that.
Thanks so much, Sumaiya. And I did some work with limited English proficient speakers, and that fact that you said, Erin, about a lot of people don't know that you can take someone into the voting booth with you who can help to translate your ballot, as long as they're not telling you how to vote. People just don't know that. And this year I'm doing some work around people with disabilities, just making sure that that polling locations are ADA compliant. And I urge you guys, as students, as young people, as social workers, when you go to these polling locations with maybe an elderly relative or with someone just paying attention to, is it accessible? And if it's not, contacting your clerk, right? And letting some voting organization know who's working on this issue. Are there steps leading up, but there's no ramp? So I think we all have a role in making sure that voting is accessible to all of us. So as a reminder, we're going to be sending out all the links and the resources that were mentioned on this call. Before we head to some wrap up, I just want to ask if there are any kind of remaining questions from the audience. We'll give you a chance to unmute yourself, or if there's any last words from our presenters. So we're not getting anything in the chat yet, but we're going to keep a lookout. What are some of the last things to our presenters that you want to leave students on this call with in regards to voting?
I'll leave you guys with, you all are social workers, right? So I know you all have a strong desire to help others, and do that by helping others share their story and helping make sure that their story is being heard by getting out the vote. There's a lot of resources that were discussed on this call, and that Aisha and Fatima, I'm sure, are going to share out. So please, don't use this time as an opportunity to kind of just scan over them, but really look at them, see how you can be involved these last couple of weeks, whether it's texting your friends, your family, or whether it's becoming a democracy fellow, or whether it's signing up to be a poll worker, which we still need a lot of poll workers here. So if you feel comfortable enough to do that, visit the michigan.gov/student voting to be involved in that as well. But be a part of the process. You cannot, and I believe this, that, we can't just complain about something. If you want your voice heard, you have to be a part of that process. So do whatever it takes. And I'm sure any of us would be happy to help you get involved. But myself personally, I'll drop my email. Feel free to contact me if you'd like to get involved in specific campus work on U of M's campus and helping Michigan students statewide.
That's great, Sumaiya. The only thing I would add to that, building off of that, would be, if you're eligible, of course, make a voting plan. If you don't have one yet, make sure that you are in fact registered. figure out, how you plan to vote, whether in person on election day or in advance via absentee. So again, I think what we talked about is that voting is one mechanism of engagement. So make that voting plan, make sure you're solid on that front. And then, ask yourself, what is one more thing that I could do? Whether that's texting a friend, whether that's, as Sumaiya mentioned, serving as a poll worker if you have availability in your schedule and you feel safe doing that. It might be, going with someone on election day or supporting someone as they fill out their ballot. If English is not their primary language, that's a great, wonderful service that you can provide and a way to support folks. So just think about it in that way. Make that voting plan. What is one extra thing I could do, even if it's just a text message? It matters and it counts. So I think seemingly small things in large numbers of people make all the difference in the world. And so I would just encourage folks, think about it in that way. And get out there, make your voice and your vote heard. And if you need support, I think everybody on the call today is available and happy to answer any questions that you might have moving forward.
Yeah, Erin, Justin, before you jump in, Trina had a quick question about, can you guys expand a little bit on what are poll workers and what is required of them in the commitment?
Sure, I can speak a little bit to that, or Sumaiya, did you want to? And either way is fine. Okay, yeah, so if you're serving as a poll worker, so essentially if you're in Michigan, you can serve as a poll worker anywhere. So say you're registered and you're voting in Ann Arbor, but there's a greater need in the city of Detroit, which is true. If you're available and you're able to get there, of course, you're eligible and can do that work. It is a full day commitment. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You do get a lunch break, but it is a full day commitment, so that's important. You get a training in advance, and poll workers serve several different functions. Primarily, I would say, when you go in to vote in person, poll workers are there to check your registration, make sure everything's all set on that end. They give you your ballot. If you have questions sometimes about like tearing off the tab or putting it into the machine, they're there to help you with that. And so they help really keep the line moving and make sure that the process is smooth. And generally, they aim to have poll workers fairly evenly split, folks who identify as Republican or Democrat, some folks who are independent, so that you don't see any type of, not that you would, but so that you don't see any type of partisanship there. So that's a function. You can also sign up to help sort and count absentee ballots. They're going to be doing some pre-processing the day before the election and then day of, and probably for a few days after. So that's a way to support and help as well. Sumaiya, anything you would add to that?
I'll just add in, I apologize. My son just woke up from a nap, but I'll drop the link below. But in Michigan, you have to be 18, and I'll drop the rest of the information in the chat box.
Good luck, Sumaiya. He's a cutie. Justin, I want to hear closing thoughts from you. And we also have a question in the chat that I think you could definitely speak to.
Okay.
Yeah, Sumaiya, if you want to go ahead.
Am I answering the question or am I?
Oh, sorry. Let me read the question. It says, if we have classes on Tuesdays, but want to serve as it's getting pushed up. Want to serve as a poll worker, is that something the school social work will support us in, or should we focus on going to classes instead?
I would
can answer that too, but go ahead, Justin, if you want to.
Well, I mean, we've had some conversations about making as many accommodations as possible for students to participate in election day activities. So that can range from faculty canceling classes or having you do that instead of class. So I would encourage you to be a poll worker or do some other election related activity during class. But don't tell your instructors I said to skip class. But I would strongly encourage that. And Trina could give more specifics on that since she's in leadership.
Well, no, it's not so much that, but Lorraine sent out a long email to faculty early in the semester saying that they have 2 or 3 options. So 1, cancel class, 2, have asynchronous materials so that if people want to participate, they can do it, but still fulfill their class obligations. And if they have class and don't cancel and don't have asynchronous, do not penalize students if they want to do things with polls. So those 3 things were given to faculty. So I don't know what every faculty decided to do in response to that call, but I would tell the student to reach out to all the classes they have that day and say, I'm planning on being a poll worker or doing X, Y, and Z, and I won't be able to come to class. And the faculty member has been told to accept that without penalty. if they aren't one that is doing asynchronous material or canceling class altogether. So just wanted to put that out there.
So please do it right now. I don't think there's anything more important than we can do to like protect democracy. I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, democracy is at risk. So do whatever you can to protect democracy. That's not my closing thought. My closing thought is that I talk to a lot of students that are, you know, interpersonal practice focused or a micro track focused. And I just want to say that this conversation is not just for the macro focused students. This is for all of the social work students. I mean, many people know that before I came to this position, I used to do child and family therapy. And it was a lot of the work that I did as a child and family therapist that got me engaged in doing policy and political work. Just as a quick example, I used to work for a community mental health system during the time when Governor Snyder and the Republican legislature slashed the budget to the CMH system, which resulted in us having to let go of a lot of clients without clear transition plans, and other CMHs were hit a lot worse than the one that I was at. But seeing that direct impact that policy has on people's day-to-day lives is something that a lot of interpersonal practice social workers are going to see. And that should really help you see that this kind of work is for all of us as social workers, not just for the people that are focusing on community work or policy work. Voter registration is something that we can all be doing, and making sure people are aware of their rights and how to exercise them is something that we need our macro social workers and our micro social workers doing. One last closing thought is that today is the last day to complete the census. The president was successful in limiting the census time. So if you have not already completed the census, please do it by 11:59 p.m. today. Tell as many people as you can to make sure they complete the census. We could have another discussion maybe in the future about the connection between the census, democracy, and voting and all of that. But just in the time I have left, just believe me that it's very, very important. So complete the census. It takes like 10 minutes to do it, and you have 10 years of impact. So tell everybody to do the census.
Yes, complete the census. That's such an important point. And I love, Justin, that you talked about how policy affects people at the micro level, and social workers who are practicing interpersonal practice can see that up close. So it's really a duty that we have. So Natalie, you have a question, so we're going to go ahead and unmute you.
Yeah, so I guess my question was just like, because I've spoken to like a few friends, and some of them like I've told like you should go vote or whatever, and like their response is basically like, oh, like my vote doesn't actually matter like for the election of the president, so like why would I go vote? So like I guess my question is like, what would your suggestion be for like how to respond to somebody who says that? Or like, do I just respond that like your vote matters like more like locally, like even if like the electoral like college like determines the president? Like how do I respond to that?
Well, obviously, if your friend is in Michigan, they really need to vote because it's going to be close. I mean, Michigan is a swing state. So, I mean, the argument that that person's vote doesn't count because of the Electoral College, if that person's in Michigan, it really, really counts.
Okay.
It's dire. It is dire.
And if this person is your friend, you probably know what they really care about and what policies that that will impact them. So definitely use that to be able to talk to them. So whether it's housing or they may be struggling or upset with a different issue, use that as a conversation starter to get them and hopefully inclined to vote. But yes, what Professor Hodge said, we got to vote. All Michiganders have to vote because our vote really, really does count.
Okay, thank you.
I would echo all of that. And again, I'll circle back to the number that I mentioned in the beginning of the discussion. Just throw out that 10,000 vote number. In 2016, Michigan went a certain way based on 10,000 votes. And whether you're happy with that or you weren't, again, that's a very small number relatively when you think about impact. So every vote truly does count. And if everyone who feels that way that your friend does, if everyone would say, you know what, I feel a little bit downtrodden about it, I'm going to get out and vote anyway, I'm going to hope for the best. If enough people do that, I think you will see positive results in terms of numbers and, depending on where you are on the political spectrum, you'll maybe see what you're looking for.
The other thing too, if it's a friend, I mean, it doesn't take that long to vote. So when people make the argument that, well, my vote doesn't count. Well, really, like, what is the risk to you in spending the little bit of time that it takes to vote, if you strongly believe it doesn't count, well, just do it anyway. I mean, it's not going to hurt you to just spend a little bit of time doing it. And your friend is asking you to do it. I mean, I'm sure you're a good friend. I mean, come on, just do it for you.
Yeah.
Put that
no, I
pressure
agree.
on. I like it.
Thank you.
Put that pressure on. And connect to the issues they care about, right? So, you know, I wrote down some closing thoughts just from all three of you guys who have just shared such amazing knowledge and experience with all of us. So some of the things that really stuck out to me is, you know, Justin, you saying that voting is the floor, not the ceiling, and that there's many other things that you can do besides voting. And the need that Sumaiya stressed about connecting with issues that move you and sharing your stories. So, you know, if someone is really troubled by housing issues, connecting that to a policy and helping to get them out to vote. And that local elections matter, right? They matter a lot. And that students, we know that all of you have the power to potentially sway elections. So this is a very powerful voting block. So I'm going to hand it, I want to thank all of you. You guys have been amazing. If we don't have any other questions, I'm going to hand it back over to Trina, and she can do some kind of closing and next steps.
All righty. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Justin, Sumaiya, and Erin. That was a great conversation. And I was hoping, you know, either in the chat or just amongst yourselves, just kind of that idea of voting plan +1. What's the one thing you are going to commit to do over the next, you know, 2 to 3 weeks? So put that in the chat, or just at least think about it consciously, since that was a suggestion that was made. So definitely have your own plan to vote. Make sure you register and vote, and encourage others to do the same. But then think about what's one other thing you can do that might make a difference, and commit to doing that over the next week or 2. Okay, what else I want to say is that we're having new sessions coming up next week. You can go online, and I think someone will put this in the chat, to see all our past and upcoming virtual conversations. And for those of you who are in field this semester, you can get field credit for these sessions. You just have to let your field faculty know and make sure that they are realizing you're doing this and get permission for that, so the hours count. Next slide. And so our next virtual session is November 12th at 12. It's appropriating food. Food justice is racial justice. So we have some incredible speakers who've been involved with community gardens and food justice and work around these issues for years. So Malik Yakini, who's executive director of the Detroit Black Food Security Network, Michelle Jackson, who's director of Sustainable Community Farms, and then the executive director of Oakland Avenue Urban Farming, and executive director of North End Christian Community Development, Jerry Hebron. And so if you're interested in food justice, or you just want to learn more about Detroit, this is a great way to learn and to get involved with this conversation. So RSVP, we'll put the link in the chat, or just look at our webpage, or go to school social work and put in community engagement. You'll find a way to get to this. And there'll also be announcements probably coming out from me during the week. So if this is of interest to you, please register for our next session as well. And with that, I will give you the last few minutes, and have a good afternoon. Thanks so much for participating.
Thanks. And as a reminder, we will be sending out the resources that all of our amazing panelists shared as a follow-up to this conversation. But thank you so much for joining us. And remember, you have the power, so use it.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.